Welcome to another episode with the Arab American Center for Culture and Arts. And today we're having a discussion of Amal Sedky-Winter's debut novel, Escape to Aswan, an intense multicultural political thriller. And it's an honor to have with us in the studio Dr. Amal Sedky-Winter. Welcome, Dr. Winter, with us.
Hello, thank you for having me on.
Dr. Sedky-Winter is a bicultural Egyptian American woman with a foot in both worlds. Her life experience and her professional life as a psychologist allow her to compare the two cultures in which she grew up from a unique vantage point. Her professional experience includes a private practice of clinical psychologist as well as serving as a court appointed evaluator, mediator, and special master. Dr. Sedky-Winter has also been a professor in three graduate programs she helped establish, the last being at the American University in Cairo, to which she bilocated from Seattle for 7 years. She has also served on many boards, including the ACLU, Psychologists for Social Responsibility, and the American Psychological Association, from whom she received the Peace Psychology Award. Dr. Sedky-Winter has been a lifelong human rights activist, having run for political office. She was recruited by the U.S. State Department and others to train Arab women in five Middle Eastern countries with a view to their political empowerment. Several years later, she was recruited to design the curriculum for and to train family court mediators throughout Egypt. Welcome again, Dr. Amal. Would you like me to address you by your first name or your last name?
Anything is, my first name is a lot easier.
Yeah. Dr. Amal is both fluent in Arabic and English, but this interview will be done in English. It will be conducted in English. Although I hope that we will have other opportunities where we're going to have discussions in Arabic too. There are a lot of various topics that we can discuss with you, Doctor, in various programs that the center presents. For example, one of the topics that we have been addressing is the topic of Arab identity, and we have about 14 episodes so far. It has started about more than a year ago and continues on. Another topic is also teaching Arabic language in the West. Another topic that we can discuss together in a different episode. Today, we're going to be speaking about the doctor's book, The Escape to Aswan, a novel that was published recently and is available on Amazon. I will be leaving the link in the comment section. And let me give you a little synopsis of the book. On a brief visit to Cairo to support an investigation, her fiancé, a Jewish American journalist, has undertaken Selma, is caught up in the machinations of a new radical Islamist group with a vendetta against her father, a man with his own dark side. A former lover and Islamist kidnaps her. He forces her to flee with him from Cairo to Aswan in the far south of Egypt. As they navigate the back roads, Salma, a privileged Egyptian American, finds herself hiding under a burqa, running desert sandstorms and relying on the goodwill of poor villagers. A page turner, Escape to Aswan is not only a political thriller, but a dramatic telling of the clashes of culture and class in the Arab world. We do not have many novels that address these subjects, so we are excited about such a novel, Doctor. Before we jump into the novel, I would like for you to give us in your own voice a brief bio of yourself navigating life between East and West.
Whoa, in 25 words or less.
I mean, other than what I mentioned, if you want to highlight some of the things. Yeah.
Well, my mother was American and my parent and my father Egyptian. My parents met in Berkeley in California. And they were the first mixed Egyptian American couple in Egypt. So it was a very unique experience to grow up originally from the beginning bicultural. And I think at about the age of 7, I figured out that there was at least two very different ways of looking at the world. I think I mentioned this in my acknowledgments, but um, I had not finished a piece of chicken at the left on my plate, and my American mother first said, "Amal, finish your food. You know there are people starving all over the world. Eat your food. Don't waste food." And my grandmother said in Arabic, of course, "Keep a little nice piece of the chicken on the side of the plate so that the maid will have a nice piece to eat." To me, that was so dramatic a difference, but they were both telling the truth. They both were telling it the way they saw the world. And, a kid can know when an adult is telling the truth.
Mhm.
So I realized there was more than one way, there was more than one truth in the world. So from that time on, I have always observed the world from as many different angles as I could find, which kept life very interesting, I have to say. It's like living in a kaleidoscope, you know.
Right. A- Actually, just in interjecting here that this realization, the earlier it comes, the easier a life becomes, and it actually saves the world a lot of trouble when people realize a different perspective.
Absolutely.
And I've seen it
Absolutely.
over and over. People who are really open-minded, they have had some sort of an experience that allowed them to see that both truths that can be opposite can exist at the same time simultaneously and innocently with no conspiracy theories behind them. Uh,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I took that so seriously and internalized that so seriously that when my own children, I have two daughters 20 months apart, and I was freezing some rice. And I think that that time they were like about 7 and 8 years old. And one of them said, Is rice expensive?" I said, "No." And then they said, "Well, does it take a long time to cook?" I said, "No, it takes about 20 minutes." "Is it difficult to make, Mom?" I said, "No, it's really easy when you get used to it." So then why are you freezing it? And I realized they had picked up the American value system, time, effort, and cost.
Hmm.
So I saved every nickel. And the next year, going from friends to family to friends to family, I took them around the world.
Nice.
And the interesting thing is, when we came back, their father, who was Egyptian, had not finished one little habayat, one little kernel of rice on his plate because the fork wouldn't pick it up. And the girl said, "Dad, do you know that people in Nepal have to walk all the way up the mountain to plant that rice?"
Mm.
So they really understood that you don't waste rice because it's a blessing, and it's not about how much it costs. So
Mm.
I took my grandchildren around the world too, because
Mm.
they have to learn these things.
And this is you yourself, you have lived in Egypt, and you've lived also in the United States when you were young, and that shaped the way you see the world and you understand the world. uh, and then you went back to University of the
Yeah,
American University in Cairo
right.
to establish the program there.
To
How
help.
was Yes? How was that experience? After you know,
Well, it was very, very interesting because I went back as an older woman,
right?
okay,
Hmm.
which is very different than being a young woman in
Hmm.
the streets of Cairo or Alexandria, which is not an easy place for a young woman to walk if she does it at all,
Right. One of the places that are very well, known,
Notorious. Yeah,
notorious for that, for sexual harassment and.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Although it is getting better, the country has actually passed a law against it for the
Mhm.
first time and has done some symbolic implementation. But it takes a long time for that to change because you have to change it in the home and, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Change culture is a
Right.
slow. So it was interesting for me um, um, to be treated differently on the street with more respect. But it was also different because children would run up to me and say, "Welcome to Egypt, welcome to Egypt, welcome to Egypt," because they thought I was a foreigner. Um,
Mm.
because I am a little fair on Egyptian side and a little dark on American side, I always get the sort of the first reaction is, "Where are you from?"
Mhm.
It's never from there. So I
Right.
would have to answer them back in Arabic, which would always drive them a little kooky, which I
Right.
love.
It's a common Arab American problem. Not
Exactly.
Arab enough and not American enough. Yes.
Exactly. Which I love because it keeps you with one foot outside of each culture, and
Mhm.
and when you do something that your family doesn't like in Egypt, they say, "Hey, she's half American. What can we say?
Mhm.
Magnoona, Amerikaya." You know. So it helps you have a camouflage that is
Mhm.
often useful. Anyway, so I've always enjoyed being a little bit on the outside. It gives you a better understanding of culture if you're not completely immersed in it. So you can understand. You are a better cultural commentator for having one foot outside of the culture
Mhm.
as well as one foot inside. So it's unusual for people to have both.
Mhm.
Anyway, I found that um, it was difficult. There were two things that were difficult for me going back to Egypt. Of course, I had visited many times, but the phenomenally increased religiosity. I don't say religion. Egypt has always been a very religious country. It has not always been flagrantly religiosity. Everybody is uh, wearing a hijab, whether they're, you know, 10 years old or 6 years old, things that are not even expected by.
What 2 years you're talking about when you were younger and when you were older going to Egypt, so we can just understand the
Well,
time.
I grew up there through my adolescence. So
Mhm.
I left there when I was 15. And then I went back when I was in my early 50s.
And what year was that when you
Oh,
were?
19. Well, I was there for the Tahrir uprising. So
So
I came back.
2011.
Yes, I came back 2013, I think,
Mhm.
2014.
Mhm. Okay.
So the 10 years before that.
Mhm.
So
So you're
this
comparing between 90s and between the 2010s. Mhm.
between the no between the 50s, the
Okay.
60s, the 50s.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Mhm.
anyway,
Well, that's a big contrast.
huge contrast. But mind you, I had been back and forth. It's
Mhm.
not like I dropped out of the sky.
Mhm.
But it's different when you're living. If you're there for a month visiting your family, Malish, it's not so. But when you're living there and the broken speaker is outside of your bedroom window every time the khutbah is on, it's a different experience to have it in your bones.
Right.
Um, so that was one thing, and the other thing um, that I found different. I've since forgotten, but it'll come back to me.
The academic experience, the being in the American University of Cairo. I just want to ask you about this new generation and the way of thinking. Of course, the 50s was a very special time. It was exploding with intellectual debates and the various uh,
Exactly,
ideologies that were trying to take over the streets. and
exactly,
after 50 years of uh, in general in Middle East, there's a lack of freedom of expression. There is not a very free space for the exchange of ideas. So after all that, and getting into the academic field, what did you see with the Egyptian youth? Especially, you were talking about the generation that created the revolution, that the
yeah. Well, there's something really interesting.
Mm,
Right after the uprising in Tahrir, um, the television was suddenly abounding in talk shows with extremely intelligent people speaking of very diverse points of view, including the Islamists speaking in a way that you could understand what their position was intellectually, not just by force,
mm,
and people debating back and forth. And then, of course, as soon as the Morsi and then the Sisi governments took over, that went away. It's like, so it's not like it doesn't exist.
mm,
That's the phenomena that really surprised me.
mhm.
It's just that it's if it's anywhere, it's underground, and I didn't find it very much underground. I think it just the faucet turns off.
Mhm. And
Uh,
with your university
and
experience, did
the university experience, first of all, you have to remember we're talking about the AUC. This is only very rich, very westernized people, kids. To my shock, absolute shock, there are families, multiple families in Egypt, who send their children to English speaking schools from kindergarten on all the way through into the AUC and out. And they never expect them to learn anything in Arabic. They've never been they've been to the Louvre, they've been to the MoMA, they've been to all sorts of, they've never been to the Egyptian culture, Museum of Art. You know, yeah, to the extent that they are totally rejecting of their culture and
Mm.
adapting one that will get them outside the country.
And do they even lack in the Arabic language?
Oh yeah, no, they don't. They don't. They speak.
Muslim,
They speak. The
slang.
colloquial,
Mm.
but they neither read nor write in Arabic.
Oh wow, that is a
Yeah,
shock to me.
it was a big shot to me.
You
Anyway,
you expect this is in contrast to the American University of Beirut. That university, for example, was the bedrock for a lot of the Arabic movements and a lot of Arabic literature.
exactly,
Yeah, I
exactly.
expected the same thing in Cairo, but it doesn't look like it. Yeah.
No, no, but on the other hand, it is also the bedrock of uh, a lot of the Middle East leadership.
Right.
So you need to think about that.
Hmm. You mean the American University of Beirut,
No, no,
Cairo?
Cairo. You see,
Hmm.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, including Khalid Fadl, the the big televangelist. I forgot was
Hmm.
it who appeals to the uh, middle class.
Hmm.
Anyway, um, so I tell you about the students. They are. I was doing graduate students, although my grandkids were there with undergraduate students, so I also knew some of the undergraduate students.
Hmm.
Um, they were very serious. They were not fooling around. They were there uh, to learn, and they worked hard. for the first 4 weeks, they would sort of looking at me like, I don't know what is going on here. And their eyes wide, they don't say anything until about the fourth week, and they get it. Okay. Because what they were not doing in their classes before was any kind of critical thinking. So one guy actually came up to me, and I said, look, I want to know what you're thinking when you answer the questions that I ask. He said, even if I disagree? I said, especially if you disagree.
Mm.
So you can see the mindset was still very much the top-down authoritarian
Right.
kind of learning. But obviously, there must have been something underneath that still, because it didn't take it. It only took them 4 weeks to figure out
Hmm.
what critical thinking is about, and then it was not so hard for them to begin to uh, at least learn to compare and contrast, for example, and things that we take for granted in Western education.
Right, right. A lot of the upbringing, and then I've also myself have been grew up over there. A lot of the upbringing actually suppresses that,
Oh, absolutely,
and teaches you that questioning is actually not a good thing.
absolutely.
It's from the shaitan.
Yep, yep,
It is being confused. Doubt is frowned upon,
exactly, exactly.
and yaqeen, the
Yeah, yeah,
100% knowledge, is actually glorified,
yeah.
and it takes a while to break, and that's one of the core differences between the Western and Eastern way of thinking.
Absolutely, absolutely. And don't forget, Yunani, we complain about how many of our governments are authoritarian, but we have authoritarian families,
Right,
and we have authoritarian religion, and we have an authoritarian society.
right,
So you're going to have an authoritarian leader.
right.
And frankly, this is ridiculous, but this is what people want. You
Hmm.
know, people wanted عاوزين احنا راجل جامد يمسكنا. You know,
Yeah.
the idea is that you want a strong man.
Hmm.
Well, I mean, I can't help it.
Right.
So I stopped talking about democracy and stuff like that long time ago. I just look at it. What is representative government?
Hmm.
Is this what your average guy in the street wants?
Hmm.
And if that's what they want, it's their country, Habibi.
That's right. The Arabic Spring have shown us that it is much deeper than people not being educated about democracy. It's much deeper than that. People are actually they lean towards
Autocracy.
yeah, and theocracy and even dictatorship. What they call it a fair or a just dictatorship.
Right.
It's,
But you all want that, of course.
which is
The
an
best daddy
oxymoron.
in the world.
So it's deeper. The problem is much deeper, and it has a lot more historical depths to it. And the solution is just not to it's not simple. It's not just introducing a Western type of democracy, which we've seen that fail over and over.
Yeah.
It's much
That's
deeper
right. Yeah.
solution. And
Yeah.
people like you who have lived both these questions in person, like I love how you said, I've stopped talking about democracy. I talk about representative government. That's a very, very, very strong statement for me, because it seemed like a gradual thing that you've landed to with your experiences, and you become more realistic, and you are dealing with that intellectual, you
Right.
know, force of change, the يعني الشباب, the
Yeah.
youth,
Yeah.
directly. So it's much
Yeah.
different when we talk about it theoretically in
Yeah.
Berkeley, or
Exactly. Exactly.
going to. Can we go to
No,
the
remember
book?
the book Escape from Freedom by Eric Fromm. It,
Mhm.
it, that's a very old book, but it's seminal. The whole idea is it's frightening. Freedom is frightening. Takes
Mhm.
us a lot of responsibility.
Dr. Amal, we are going to talk about a little bit about the escape to Aswan. So, when you chose to write, and it doesn't seem that you have a lot of writing out there. I've looked; I couldn't find much other publications. So, when you've so much capable of publishing, and when you decided to publish, you decided to publish a novel. Tell us, why did you pick that form of art, of writing, to speak your mind through it?
Because I was headstrong and foolish. I saw the title of a book that says, "You too can write a damn good novel." So I
Mhm,
decided, what the heck? No, actually, what happened is that my, this novel is the only novel. I'm writing a memoir, but it's called "Just Don't Tell My Kids," an
mhm.
episodic memoir.
That's a beautiful title.
But anyway,
Well, you have the courage to put everything in it.
yeah, well, they can publish it after I go.
Yeah,
um, but
as long as they don't decide that.
yeah, well, exactly. No, no, I'll leave it in safe hands. um, the novel grew out of completely out of my political activism. Completely, I wanted to do something that explained what I'm just been talking about, and I realized I'm basically someone who's a painter and a visual artist. Um, but I realized that I couldn't do that in a visual artist way. So I had to learn to write a novel. So I spent a lot of time, a lot of money, and many, 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 many hours learning how to write a novel. It is something you can learn. It's not like you don't have to be born like, you know, Jane Austen or Shakespeare or Naguib Mahfouz, and you can just sit down and write it. No, particularly, this is not a heavy literature novel. This is a uh, fiction, literary fiction
Mhm,
for the mass market, and it's what exactly I intended it for. Is for what I think of as the person who would not necessarily want to learn about the Middle East, but doesn't mind learning about it if you can give it in an entertaining way.
mhm.
And so I checked around which is the best genre for that. And it turns out to be a political thriller. So I did it very purposefully. Um, and
Who's the audience in your mind?
the audience in my mind is young people, not young adults, but people in their 30s on up,
Mhm,
um, and people who like political thrillers because there's a whole genre, a whole group like that, including myself. I love political thrillers,
mhm,
and people who are interested in issues of multiculturalism. And that includes people who are multicultural themselves, but also increasingly people who realize that they need to learn to become multicultural in a world that is getting more and more intermingled and intertwined. So I think it has a broad audience,
mhm.
besides Arab Americans, of course, for whom, of course, it would be a very natural book.
Right. So the characters in the book, I can't help but think that they're somehow autobiographical. Selma, 38 years old Egyptian American woman. If you read about Selma, or you read into Selma's character in the book, I can't help but relate her to you.
All debut novels are usually
Right.
about the author, because that's all we know.
And Paul seems to be your husband,
My late husband.
your late husband, and Murad, is he also a representation of your father, you'd say?
My Not my father. Murad is the young man she met in
Oh,
graduate
yes,
school
the
in
young man.
California. He is a composite of many young people I knew. Uh, I was married. My husband at the time was Egyptian. We were the local drop in center for the Egyptian community. So, we always had tea and whatever food was there. Sometimes I would come home, I'd find other people there already cooking in the molokhia, so it was really the home for everybody. So there would be a lot of young men uh, who were away from home, who didn't have their mothers, didn't have their sisters, didn't have anyone, any female that they could relate to, who understood their culture and could speak Arabic and or English or whatever. And so I think there are a number of people who spent more time with me than they would otherwise have, just because um, I was there and I was a safe person. I was married. There was not going to be anything weird, but they could um, have their internal feelings about uh, projecting onto me somebody that they might be interested in. So I have the model for that.
Mhm,
No, I never had anybody who was,
mhm,
uh, in. I was never involved in somebody.
mhm. Does so the novel that has that a clash of civilizations that has taken place within
Use that
Egypt.
word,
Oh, you
farm.
don't like it?
Oh no, Samuel Harris. Oh my
I don't like it either. I mean, I
God,
believe in the dialogue between civilizations,
right.
but I mean it without its context. So
Oh.
the clash that takes place within Egypt's culture between
Right,
extreme
right,
Islamicism
right,
that's new to the
right,
Egyptian culture. It's
right,
really a reaction
right.
to
Well, it comes from
colonialism.
Saudi Arabia anyway.
Right, which is now gratefully it is has been drained from its resources today.
Pariah state.
Yeah, finally, but that extremism that started in the 20s, 30s in Egypt, that's not reflective of the long history of the Egyptian culture. So it created a clash within it, and then there is a larger clash that is um, in parallel to that clash, which is the clash between also Islam and the West. And I'm not confirming that there's
Right, right.
such a clash, but
Yes,
there's
yes. Yeah,
one perspective of it is that it's a clash. So you've zoomed in on that clash in a fiction that's very vivid in its in imagery. Um, Influences of when you wrote this novel, influences that made you focus and zoom in on these images.
well, remember, this book is aimed at the Western audience, who really doesn't understand the Middle East as well as the Middle East understands the West. Always the victim underneath the lower person on the power schedule, knows that the person above, the culture above them, the servant knows the master better than the master knows the servant, that because it's important that the more powerful person, what are they going to do? Because that's your protection. So you get to know the more powerful person. So since we are not the more powerful people in the eyes of the West, they don't know us as well as we know them. Um, so I deliberately picked three points of view, as we say, POVs,
Mhm,
um, to depict the issues that are currently uh, operating in the Middle East, at least specifically in Egypt, but I've also I've been in 5 or 6 other countries of the Middle East, and you see the same phenomenon, different coloration perhaps, but same phenomenon. And you're also seeing the response to globalization. When as the more groups get closer together, they become more tribal, because they are afraid that the other group is going to take them over, or you know marry their children away from them, or whatever. So you do tend to see a reaction to um, the groups getting closer together. You see a reaction to them being pulled further apart.
So these three perspectives you spoke about are basically Selma with a foot in both worlds. She's the multicultural, more understanding, more sympathetic mind. Paul is representative of the Western point of view, and Murad is representative of the Arab Islamist world. Do you feel that your novel is delivering that message to in a way that makes a person understands the other person's view? Have you received any reaction in that sense?
Well, I got some, not to be يعني يشكر في نفسه إلا إبليس, but I got some very, very flattering reviews uh, from Publishers Weekly, from Arab America, all the way to Kyrgyz.
Mhm.
And one of the things that they pointed out repeatedly was how nuanced my characters were. And I did that very deliberately.
Mhm.
Um, it's true that Murad represents the Arab Islamist, but he also has best friend was Coptic when they were younger and before Islamism became so pronounced. So he went back to him. Uh, he also understands the Coptic presence in Upper Egypt, which people don't understand, don't even know about. Even in Egypt, they don't know about. Um, so they're all nuanced.
Mhm.
The Jewish American is uh, pro-Palestinian, anti-Zionist, and people don't realize. A lot of Arabs don't realize that some of the best protectors of Arab American civil rights and relationships have been Jewish Americans.
Right.
I'm sorry, this is ridiculous.
No problem.
I apologize.
It once it rings somewhere, it rings everywhere. Yeah. Thanks to Apple. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I turned it off on my watch,
Yeah.
Habibi. Dead.
Yeah.
Um, so, um, so the characters are all nuanced on purpose. I
Mm.
worked really hard because they are delivering the message I want to deliver.
Right. I have a discussion many times with my friends who teach English literature, and one of the things that we question, the students keep studying these classic works, and that type of setting curriculum. If you need to answer anything, Doctor.
It will stop in just 1 second.
That style of teaching classic
Mm.
novels or writings, and it seems that it's a little bit out of date because of the speed of how things are changing.
It was very funny because just yesterday, one of
Yeah.
my best friends, a woman, was telling me about the decline of English literature departments, and because of all of the younger people, if they read at all,
Right.
don't want to read Jane Austen, and they want to read things that are relevant. Obviously, should be.
Yeah, I mean, it's not only about relevancy with the content; it is the psychological relevance, and
Of
you're
course, of
you're an
course.
expert on that. So I feel like if a person in the 70s is reading Jane Austen, they would still have the same flow to understand and engage. But today, there's a severe psychological difference that
Right.
I'm not sure how effective is this, and we
Well,
need
that's a
more
very
relevant.
very interesting example, Wissam, because I was actually thinking about specifically Jane Austen.
Mhm.
Jane Austen here for American youth probably doesn't resonate much. But somebody once said to me, and I think it's really true, if you want to understand Egyptian society, read Jane Austen.
Amazing, Victorian.
Because it has all the nuances of the class issue, you
Mhm.
know, and how much you show, how much of it is about show, how much of it is about who's got more power, who's got less power,
Yeah.
who you're going to marry, you know. It's interesting.
I love this statement because I'm a big fan of Jane Austen myself.
Yeah.
I feel I haven't understood Jane Austen. I grew up in Abu Dhabi,
No, that's different. Yeah.
which is a desert. But I
It's,
understood Jane Austen when I spent one of the summers in Essex, in East Essex, in the place where Jane Austen
oh my.
grew
Oh,
up. And all of a sudden, her novels all of a sudden opened up to me.
totally makes sense, doesn't it? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well,
So yeah, the environment and
to
has
Cairo.
what I was getting into is that maybe one day, and maybe one day soon, novels such as the one that you've written, The Escape to Aswan, might be something that needs to be examined or taught or read in high schools. That bridge, especially when I talk about, for example, this area, most of the schools in Dearborn Heights area are predominantly Arab American, and they teach Arabic in the school. And I feel if they examine some of the novels that deal directly with their with the issues that they live with, that it will be more engaging and maybe more beneficial.
More relevant to them than Naguib Mahfouz, you know, whom I
Mm,
also think is a fantastic writer.
mhm.
But how relevant is that to a kid in Dearborn?
Right. And
Mm,
with the changing times, we need to catch up with the things that are most relevant to us,
yeah,
just because they're going to start lose some relevance
yeah.
very soon because things are changing very fast.
Well, that's one of the things that actually, when people ask me who is it addressed to, in one of the places I wrote, it said it'd be an excellent book for teachers to use in teaching multiculturalism because it's very accessible. I made it very accessible. You know,
Mhm,
it took me 2 years to undo my British writing and 2 years to undo my academic writing, you know,
mhm,
because I wanted it to be, you know, easy to read.
mhm. Yeah, and that's might be difficult for a person well versed like you. To sometimes writing simpler is more difficult
Oh
than
yeah, 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 yeah,
writing
for sure.
more
For sure.
complex. So I wanna. I mean, we only have few minutes left, but I wanted to jump into a subject that ties everything together, which is the subject of Arab American identity. We just celebrated last Wednesday in the Arab American Center for Culture and Arts. We celebrated the annual commemoration of the establishment of the Arab Pen League, the Pen League in New York that was established in 1920 by Jubran Khalil Jubran and
Mm.
Mikhail Naimi. And this Pen League, they were very special in many ways. They've written in Arabic and English, and their Arabic writing had an influence on back home on the Arabic world, and it's very rare that expatriates write and they actually have an influence back on the literature home. This was, although the term Arab American was not born yet at that time, but
You can thank our American Institute for that. We worked very hard to establish that.
1940 something, the first time it was used in
Yeah.
one of the conferences. Yeah, that's documented by Dr. Hani Bawardi in
Oh,
his
really? Mm.
the Syrian immigrants, and he's a member, by the way, of the Arab American Center. That Arab American mission, the Arab American um, uh, character, personality that mixes both the West and the East and produces literature that represent that. We had a decline of that in the 60s and 70s, as you know, except for exceptions like Edward Said and etc. And then are we living now with a second and third generation very well educated Arab Americans, more educated than the average household in America? Are we looking at a new renaissance of Arab American literature and identity?
Wow, I wish I knew more. My instinct tells me, I'm just looking at when I buy books, bought a lot of books to help me write this book. There's certainly a lot more books by Arab Americans and Arabic books translated into English. Um, there's certainly a lot more of them than there were, say, 30 years ago when I was looking for books. It was very hard to find. You had to sort of go through specialized libraries. Now you can get them on Amazon. It's amazing. You just pick up Arab and run it through Amazon, and you'll find all sorts of books, things
Mhm,
you never. So I think there is a lot more, but probably because there's a bigger readership. I mean, books, if you don't have someone reading, you're not going to publish.
mhm,
So, so I think you're right that this, I, I'm waiting to use the word renaissance because that's a big word.
mhm. There is a question here. Despite the cultural regression in the Arabic word, the novel is the only genre that didn't lose ground. Is this a good sign?
It's a very good sign, but as I understand the novel in the Arab world, the novel is a reasonably recent uh, genre. I mean, like in the last few hundred years. It's not the original Arabic genre. We're much more, our genre is developed much more out of the oral tradition. So you don't have a novel which is known with a beginning, middle, and end. You tended to have long discourses and
Mhm,
descriptions without necessarily a tight thought structure.
mhm. Have you seen, how did you see the literature scene in Egypt while we stayed there? There's always this talk of there is a huge lack of reading and writing in the Arab world, as representative in the number of books published, and the United Nations a statistic about the average number of minutes an Arab reads a year is embarrassing. did you touch يعني هل لمستي ذلك في الواقع? Did you see that in reality in Egypt?
Like الواقع has partly it's social. You know, if you take a book and you go into your bedroom and try and read, five people will come in and ask you, Malik, ما تيجي تقعدي معانا. You know, it's not easy to withdraw.
حد يزعلك؟
Oh, exactly. It's very difficult to withdraw and to read because it's antisocial. It's considered antisocial. Um,
Wow, it's an amazing way to put it. Doctor, how do you define or see your Arab American identity?
well, I asked my grandson, who's now in his 30s, I said, when he was young, I said, so what is it like to have an Egyptian grandmother? He said, it gives me bragging rights. So things have changed a lot since his mothers were growing up, when you did not want to flout your cultural
Mhm,
differences. Now it's it's a point of honor to be able to be multicultural. Of course, I'm living in Seattle, which is La La Land, but there are I have lived other places, and it is still basically the ethos is that it's good to be multicultural rather than negative. When it used to be, you all had to be purebred white Americans,
Mhm.
no matter what your color was.
Right. Do you connect to the term Arab American, or do you connect more to the term, for example, Egyptian American?
Oh God, no! I definitely connect to Arab American.
Hmm.
I'll tell you something interesting. I used to be seen in my community when I was in California, and I was considered the Egyptian American, you know, psychologist or the Egyptian American professor, or whatever. And then when I insisted on being identified as Arab American, I lost about 30% of my friends.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Mm.
we're talking back when Arab was really not okay.
Mhm.
And when I insisted on running for office because certain people told me to get out of their enclave because only they were allowed to control the Democratic Party, and we know what I'm talking about, I ran for the first thing I found open. I would have run for dog catcher, frankly, but fortunately there was a board of trustees position,
Mhm.
and I lost another 30% of my
Mhm.
friends.
And what have you gained?
I gained at least another 60% back
Right.
of
Mhm.
different friends,
Mhm.
um, a lot of support. Uh, it helps. It helps to be polite and entertaining and understanding when you're trying to put your point of view across instead of belligerent and negative and whining. Okay?
Mhm.
Nobody likes whiners.
Right.
And we tend as Arabs to complain.
Mhm.
And I think we need to do less complaining and more celebrating.
So we before the episode ends, I just wanted to, so I don't forget it, to extend an invitation for you to come to Dearborn and visit us.
Oh, I'd love to. I've been
And
here before, but I'd love to come again.
this is a city where, the mayor now is also from an Arab American descent.
Yeah.
He's hosting a city-wide breakfast in the day of Eid, and we have it's really an amazing time for
Yeah.
Dearborn, where the second and third generation are creating a new scene of Arab America
Isn't that
for the
wonderful?
city.
And it's so different. It's wonderfully. Yeah, we have it here too. Yeah.
And defiant to many of the people's
So,
expectations, the Arab American community has been very open minded regarding so many different issues.
absolutely.
That's not expected from them, which is also a statement to how
Right.
that multiculturalism changes the point of view.
Yeah, yeah. I had enormous support in the Arab American community, in the Arab American community. Uh, to my late husband being Jewish, he was because he was a very, very decent man, obviously.
Mhm.
But they there was plenty of room for him to be integrated into the society.
Yes. Like you said, some of the best allies that you realize when you're in America and you're an Arab American, you realize that some of the best allies to your qadaya, يعني, to your issues,
Right,
are
right,
the Jewish American
right.
individuals who are very supportive sometimes for of our issues.
And they are the ones who are going to be able to make the changes in the Middle East because it's the Jewish American community that has to be able to change Congress so that
Yes.
Congress can change its position in the Middle East. And nothing else is going to change things except
That's
that.
true. That's true. And that's probably a point that is not looked at enough within the Arab American community. The support of Jewish community, the Jewish American community, that is more moderate in handling these issues is very important. And if there's something
Political,
symbolic of it, there's nothing much more symbolic than the Arab American support of Bernie Sanders as the candidate.
right,
Had very
right,
strong support
right.
from our community.
And Jesse Jackson's support of us.
Right.
Yeah.
Just a couple more questions, Doctor. You worked with the Department of State in some of these multicultural projects. Just want to ask you about your experience with the Department of State, the department that draws a lot of the foreign policy in the Middle East. Is criticized much when sometimes an Arab American is defending America in the East, he or she says that this is just a foreign policy. It's not representative of Americans or etc. What does, because I just had that discussion this morning actually with someone. What is some of the actions and the strategies of the Department of State? Is it because of lack of knowledge, lack of uh, um, enough research and understanding of the different cultures, or is
Hold
it?
on 1 second. I'm going to get you something.
Sure.
I got this a long time ago
Mhm.
off file cabinet in the State Department. On the file cabinet of the State Department from Gamal Abdel Nasser. The genius of you Americans is that you never make clear-cut, stupid moves, only complicated, stupid moves, which make us wonder at the possibility that there may be something to them which we are missing.
I mean, can you show it to us on the screen? Thank you. And you agree with this statement?
Totally. And there is also malicious. It's not
Right.
all the stupidity. Some of our, but you'd be surprised how much of it is stupidity.
Yeah.
Like a lot of I went to Iraq right after the invasion to do a survey. I was just 4 months after the invasion to do a survey about whether or not they could do an election, and if so, when. And we told Hamar Bush that if he held elections then there would be a civil war. But he wanted them before his election. So they had elections then and there was a civil war,
Yeah.
So it's complicated. But I'll tell you my answer to your original question.
Mhm.
When I give workshops sponsored by the Middle East, by the US Department or whatever else might be sponsoring it, I say, listen, if the plate is tainted, ملوث, okay, الطبق ملوث معلش. If there is something on it that you want and need, just pick it off carefully. Okay? So when I come and give you a training, take what is useful to you. You don't have to touch the plate. Okay?
Mhm.
And the other thing is, to be fair to the department, I was never, ever censored. Okay? And I said things that would make your hair curl about what happened to me when I was in politics and the kinds of illegal things that were done to me by the lobby, and on and on and on. Not one person ever censored me. And when I got excellent reviews, they posted them.
That's great.
But yeah, I'm not innocent, and they're not innocent.
Yeah, no, I mean, we're not in a position to judge them at this point. I'm just was wondering, like, your view, because from your you've worked closely to them, and I myself, I have some experience with the State Department, and I saw how careful they are about
Right,
selecting good candidates,
right,
but they're good candidates mostly due to academic reasons
right.
and not enough true life experience, multicultural experience, and
Mm,
I felt the lack of that at that level. But
mhm.
I'm not in a position where I can judge accurately. But what you've said has been very insightful. And the final question, Doctor, and thank you for being with us, is. About what you've been doing. I mean, this interview is not about it, but the project, the project of psychology in psychologists for social responsibility. That's one thing. And another thing that you did with psychology in Egypt. Can you talk to us about that as far as
Well,
the
I was very impressed, extremely impressed by the openness in society to psychological help. Obviously, in the upper and uh, lower, lower upper and upper middle classes. But I tell you one that was very interesting. I was one of these people who insisted I would not use my American passport to get things done, which is the way you get things done in Egypt. If you got an American passport, you can get it done, but forget it if you try and do something with your Egyptian passport. Anyway, so I would insist on going to the most baladi place there was, to stand in line with 1,000 people until I could push my way forward with Taban, with my hair fixer, to get to the desk.
Mhm.
So I was sitting next to this desk, and there's five or no 10 people crowding it, each one handing the guy a paper, and the other one putting "Nabi wa habibi," no, 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 yeah, andin, no, 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 on and on. And the guy found out I was a psychologist, the guy who's doing the paperwork. He stopped all these people and he said, "I need to talk to her." And he started to talk to me about sexual problems with his wife in front of everybody.
Uh-huh. He's
Okay.
giving a free session, though.
So I'm just thinking, like, this wouldn't happen in a safe way, you know.
Mhm. But that tells you how much need there is in
Yeah.
society.
And people and the yeah, there's not the negativity that there used to be, as there used to be everywhere in the world.
Mhm, mhm.
So it was very interesting, and I saw many people who I saw for the reasons of their family problems and children, etc. Usual.
Mhm. Thank you, Dr. Amal Sedky-Winter, for this interview. The Escape to Aswan is available. I sometimes wonder, Doctor, if there is a symbolic meaning in the escape to Aswan, which I haven't digged more deeper with you in this interview, but I will leave it to the readers to figure out the symbolism and the
Yeah,
term escape to Aswan.
as long as you can get back out.
And the book is again available on Amazon. The link is in the
It's available everywhere in bookstores and in
Barnes
Barnes
and
and Noble.
Nobles. Yes, available everywhere. And we hope, Doctor, that we can also get you with the other interviews
We'll
on
be happy to.
different topics. And we're looking forward to also see you one day in Dearborn.
Inshallah.
Thank you and good luck to you. And thanks for all of you who watched this. This will be available immediately after it ends on all the platforms of the Arab American Center for Culture and Arts. Please do share it with others, and it will be available in a few days at the Dearborn Blog podcast. Thank
All
you.
right. Good luck, and thank you very much. Ramadan Kareem to everybody.
To you too, and have a great weekend.
Ma salama. Bye bye.